The easiest way to add an artificial shadow is just draw it. I have this bag already isolated on white, so I'll select the background with a single click of the magic wand, inverse the selection, copy its contents to a separate layer, and go back to the background layer. Now I'll just grab the normal brush, make it black, make the tip soft, and set the opacity to something about 30%. As I draw on the background layer, it will not affect the object and it will seem like there's a shadow under the object. Then I can just flatten the image and that's it. Well, not really. If I zoom in, you'll be able to see that there's a white border around the image. So maybe I should have shrunk the selection before copying it to another layer so that this white border would have stayed out. I'll go back in history to the step just before the layer via copy command and contract the selection by 2 pixels. Now when I do the same things as before and draw a shadow, it looks more or less okay, no white border around the bag. Seems easy, but it's really not. Some objects are tricky and you won't be able to add a realistic shadow with one stroke. This is a high heel shoe. I just want to show you the way it drops shadow. It's not even and the shadow like this cannot be easily reproduced by drawing. There's a gap between the toes and the heel, so the shadow should be less thick in this area. I have to keep this in mind as I draw the shadow. Does it look real to you? Well, it's not too bad, but I assure you that if you let 10 retouchers do the same thing, the result will not be stable. Some shadows will be bigger, some will be thicker. Drawing is definitely an option, but let's also see how you can add shadows automatically. Let's record an action now. I'll use this bag as an example. I'll select the white background with the magic wand, so let's suppose it's the step right before isolation. When you run the isolating action, after the isolating steps like modifying the selection and filling the background with white, but instead of deselecting the image, let's make a shadow there. What you have to do at this stage is to inverse the selection, then contract it by 2 pixels, cut it to another layer by pressing Ctrl-Shift-J, then Ctrl-click on this new layer to select it. Then it's time to access the Transform Selection command in the Select menu. You have to alter the reference point location by clicking on the lower middle square, which is to the left in the tool panel. Then, change its height to 10% from 100% and press Enter. Now copy the contents of the selection by pressing Ctrl-J again and move it down so that it ends up between the background layer and the layer with the whole bag. You can do it by pressing Ctrl square bracket or go to the Layer menu, Arrange submenu and click on the Send Backward command. This is our shadow wannabe layer now. Click on it twice, not on the name or the image, just on the tab, and it will bring you the Layer Style menu. Go to the Drop Shadow tab and set it up. I've got these settings: Blend Mode Normal, Opacity 60, Color Black, Angle 90, Distance 0, Spread 0, and Size 90. It makes a pretty nice small shadow right next to the object. But this kind of shadow is not really natural, as the real one would be dark right under the object and it would become gradually lighter with distance. Click on the Contour box in the Quality tab to bring up the contour editor. Half-round or Gaussian presets will give you a more realistic look. Now press OK and all you have to do is flatten the image. There's the Flatten Image command in the Layer menu, but you'd better assign a shortcut for it like I did, because you'll be using it a lot. I have it on Ctrl-P, which is originally reserved for printing, but I don't even have a printer, so why not changing it to the Flatten Image instead? Now stop recording and let's see what we have managed to achieve. If I go back in history to the point where I had the background around the image selected and run the action, it will create a shadow without any problems. But don't get excited yet, because this shadow fits this particular bag. Why do you think it will fit any other object? If I try to run the action on this item, you will see that it doesn't look so well. The transformation we did to the bag does not work in this case. What about the head? Well, more or less okay. And the high heel shoe doesn't look too bad, but definitely is fake. If I do the same to a watch, the shadow will be a bit too high. So, as you can see, it's not really possible to record an action that will add a realistic shadow to all kinds of objects. It means that you have to do the transformation of the shadow manually, otherwise the result will not be good enough. To do so, find the Transform Selection step in the action we've just written and click on the empty box next to it. Next time you run the action, this step will demand user input. Now let's run the action again and see how we can modify the shadow to make it look nicer. The bag is our original example. I'll select the background and run the action. It will stop right at the moment where you're supposed to modify the selection. If you think you don't need to do it for this particular item, which is true, just press Enter and the action will do the rest of the commands. The watch shadow was too high, so I'll shrink the selection even more as soon as I get prompted. And the result is much better. As for the head, I'll make the selection higher so the shadow becomes wider. Before that, we had a very narrow shadow that looked totally fake, but now it looks more decent. The high heel shoe. Same as before, I'll pull the transformed layer so that it becomes higher, but just a little bit. It's not perfect, but doesn't look bad either. The scarf is lying flat, so the shadow shouldn't be just in the bottom of the image, it should be pretty much everywhere. I'll transform the layer so that it almost reaches the top of the image.